In this presentation, I would like to focus on the impact of the new upcoming EU clinical trial regulation on the scope of ethics review, in particular on its potential to narrow down the scope of ethics review for clinical drug trials and perhaps also for other types of biomedical research. Let us start from the broader European picture on the scope of ethics review for human participant research. If we take non-biomedical human research studies like studies in psychology or social science studies, there are no binding regulations which require REC review for this type of research. On the other hand, there is a common ground for REC review in case of biomedical research, which is provided by the Council of Europe Additional Protocol to the Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine concerning biomedical research. This instrument requires REC review for a full range of research activities in the health field involving interventions on human beings, according to the paragraph 15. And also this kind of REC review includes both scientific aspects as well as documents like informed consent or recruitment materials for participants of studies. However, additional protocol is signed only by 23 countries and ratified by only 12 member states, and therefore only these 12 member states have this REC review provision as a binding one. In the rest of our presentation, I will concentrate on the upcoming clinical trial regulation, which has an important potential to change the scope of REC review. Regulation on clinical trials on medicinal products for human use is a very important document for our discussion. It is directly applicable in all 27 EU member states, and it will replace the current clinical trial directive very soon at the end of 2021. The regulation brings structural changes to the REC system. First, its time frame will make it difficult to continue with the traditional model of face-to-face regular ethics review because in most cases, competent authority and REC of a particular member state will only have 12 days to produce a response to the reporting member state report. Also, and what is very important for our discussion, this regulation has a potential to change the scope of REC review in the EU member state. This change of the scope of ethics review is possible because the upcoming EU clinical trial regulation splits the assessment report to be produced by the ethics committees into part 1 and part 2. Part 1 of the assessment report concerns scientific and methodological aspects of the clinical trial. Its main overall objective is the assessment of the therapeutic and public health benefits and risks, as well as burdens to the research subject. On the other hand, part 2 of the assessment report concerns only local, so-called local aspects, that is, materials for informed consent and recruitment, materials for rewarding or compensating research subjects, data protection, as well as suitability of investigators and trial sites, and damage compensation. The mentioned division of the assessment report into 2 parts also allows a shift in the model of ethics review. This is because upcoming clinical trial regulation leaves it to the member state to choose the scope of ethics review, and it allows a so-called narrow model of ethics review, which only covers part 2 of the assessment report and does not include methodological and scientific aspects which allow to make a risk-benefit evaluation of a particular clinical trial. This is very different from the current clinical trial directive, which allows only so-called integral or broad model of ethics review, incorporating both the methodology, risk-benefit analysis of the clinical trial, as well as informed consent documents and other Part 2 related materials. What are the consequences of such a narrow scope review? First, EUREC would not be involved in reviewing some important aspects of clinical trials, such as exposure of research participants to an inferior treatment as compared to the standard treatment available. For example, in case of placebo-controlled trials. Also, EUREC will not be involved in reviewing decisions on a minimal risk standard, which is very important for enrollment of vulnerable research participants. We can also claim that such a narrow review deviates from international research ethics standards, from this integral research ethics review model incorporating both methodology and such important documents as informed consent, which is enforced in the Declaration of Helsinki, SIOMS guidelines, as well as the mentioned additional protocol of the Council of Europe. What is the situation in the EU member states regarding the scope of ethics review? As for the end of 2020, out of 27 EU member states, 14 member states opted for the broad ethics review. However, 3 countries already opted for the narrow ethics review, leaving 10 countries where information at that time was not available, or different models were still under consideration. This is important because undecided member states might be tempted to opt for the narrow scope review because, firstly, it is logistically easier. RECs have 45 days to review and exchange views with the competent authorities on Part 2 in case of narrow review, as compared to 12 days in case of the broad scope review. Also, a simpler review system can give a competitive advantage in the market of clinical trials. To conclude, we can claim that this narrow ethics review deviates from what is regarded as the integral and broad ethics review enforced by international guidelines. It's also important to note that this narrowing down ethics review process can have an impact for other types of human research. However, even if we take both Parts 1 and Part 2 as a basis for ethics review, structural REC reform is still needed in all the EU member states. This is because of the tight deadlines, which require a higher level of human resources, and also due to the change of traditional face-to-face regular meetings of RECs. On the other hand, we can also see some positive impact of the regulation in terms of management of RECs or developing alternative online modalities of REC work. However, these issues do not seem to feature at the moment sufficiently in the current public debate as well as academic debate. So still we have some time before the end of the year to facilitate this kind of discussion. Thank you.